of La Penta. This is WICR.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sports Wall. We are at our third segment of the day, kind of finishing up our NBA talk. And I wanted to get to this earlier in the week, but just didn't get a chance to. But we all understand this week the big talk was about Derrick Rose and just another devastating injury to one of the most exciting, dynamic players in the NBA. I mean, another meniscus tear for him. And when I woke up the morning that I read this, I was crushed. It was such a gut-wrenching blow because, I mean, in the NBA, like I just said in the last segment, it's all about star power. Star power is just in the NBA the thing that makes it so much more fun to watch than anything else, in the regard that just these individuals do things that no one else can replicate. They all have their unique quality to them that no one else can replicate. I always go back to 2011, the season where Derrick Rose won the MVP. It was one of the most exciting years of basketball I ever watched. It was LeBron's first year with the Heat, and him and Derrick Rose were the hands-down two best players that year. They were unstoppable. Derrick Rose, watching him that year was just, I can't put into words how exciting it was to watch this guy play. You couldn't stop him. When he went to the rim, when he was distributing the ball, you had no answer for Derrick Rose that year. The Heat and the Bulls met in the Eastern Conference Finals that year. He wasn't great in that finals, but that year, you look at his body of work, that is what we should have been having these last couple years out of Derrick Rose. You could only think he would have gotten better from that point if it wasn't from the injuries. The first injury, of course, sustained in the playoffs against the 76ers before the 76ers turned into the Washington Generals. But it's just really, really sad because we might have lost that 2011 Derrick Rose. It's really hard to envision that he'll ever be the same again. And I really hope that I'm wrong. But, I mean, I was listening to Tim Legler the other day, and, I mean, I don't know medical terms as well as some other guys do. But, I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, that each time you break, something happens there and you tear that meniscus, and they have to go in there and work on it, it gets weaker each time. This is the second time, and you've got to think psychologically, this has got to be such a devastating blow to a guy who already had difficulty bouncing back mentally from what happened. I mean, I thought it was really wrong when people criticized Rose when he really took his time the first time from coming back. I just thought it was wrong because coming back from an injury like that mentally has got to be extremely difficult because Derrick Rose knows that how fragile an injury like this is, and he's got to be honest with himself. He's going to be a little bit weaker and a little bit more prone to having that happen again. Now this is happening to him a second time in a second consecutive year. It's got to be devastating. There are no words that can describe it. I mean, as a fan of the game, not even if you're a fan of the Chicago Bulls, just if you're a fan of the NBA and you just enjoy watching transcendent talent, this has got to be a gut-wrenching blow to you, and it is to me because, like I keep saying, that 2011, I was watching Derrick Rose every night. If I got a chance, I had my TV tuned into LeBron in Miami, and I had it tuned into Derrick Rose every single night. It just showed you, and I think we've seen this time and time again in the NBA. Penny Hardaway, we saw it with him, how much of a transcendent talent he looked like he was shaping out to be. The injury bug bit him, and he was just never could reach that full potential we saw. Grant Hill is probably the best picture of anyone, the way his career started out, then the injuries, and he rushed back, and he was never that transcendent superstar again. It's really tough because we feel like, I mean, taking Derrick Rose aside, because this is more for him than us, but I mean, it robs us of watching a guy who could really be one of the greatest of all time. I mean, a lot of people say all the time, that Derrick Rose is a he's a guy you'd like better than Allen Iverson. He plays a lot like him, but he's a more likable version. And I think that's a pretty good assessment. I like Derrick Rose a lot, and I'm going to get to Rajon Rondo in a minute, but I mean, it upsets you too because Derrick Rose is a good teammate. He is a good guy you like to root for because he's just such a guy who just wants to win. He really, I mean, that Chicago Bulls team and him, they've kind of gone hand in hand. And it's very disappointing to me. I just don't know if we can ever expect to see the same type of form from him again. I hope we will one day, but right now, just a speedier recovery to him, and we'll see what happens there. But Rajon Rondo is the next one that I want to get to because I've always been on this show very, very critical of Rajon Rondo. I just don't like his mindset, and we saw it in Boston. He butted heads with Doc Rivers many times. We saw it again with Rick Carlisle. We kind of all understand the situation now. Rick Carlisle called the play. He did not run that said play, and then he sat the rest of the game. He was suspended the next game for conduct detrimental to the team. I just don't think that this is a guy you really want to deal with. I really don't. Now, I said when Dallas got him, absolutely, it made them a better basketball team. He's a phenomenal basketball player, but he is a diva, and he will always be a diva. I just can't stand guys who butt heads with their coaches like that. And let's be honest, Doc Rivers and Rick Carlisle are pretty darn good head coaches. Both of them have NBA championships to their names. And when you butt heads with a guy who I think doesn't have any claim to his name, that changes things a little bit from an ownership perspective. You're really not going to side ways with not going to side ways with the coach if he hasn't done anything yet. But Rick Carlisle is one of the best coaches in the NBA. Doc Rivers is one of the best coaches in the NBA. If Rajon Rondo has found with both these coaches who are phenomenal that he can't get along with them, that shows me something about Rajon Rondo, that I don't want this guy being my franchise player. And let's be honest, he's a guy who's going to want a lot of money after the season, and he hasn't earned it. He most certainly has not. Very good player. I think he's one of the better point guards in the NBA, but I'm not dealing with his diva attitude, and he hasn't been consistent enough to warrant a big type contract. He's been very good in spots, has never been consistent enough for me, and when you just make things difficult. In the NBA, what do we see out of the teams that are winning NBA championships? From top to bottom, we have consistency, collective buying in, and collectively everyone gets along. LeBron James, we always see it out of him, one of the most giving teammates in the NBA. Always has done so much to get his teammates involved. Has LeBron had little spats with his teammates? Sure, who hasn't? But I think the thing you always see about LeBron is he's always come back to the guy. It's just that temporary moment. We saw it with Mario Chalmers more than anything. But it's always coming back, being the leader, understanding how his role, how he has to lead. And I think right now with Cleveland, with Kyrie Irving's development, we're seeing that very well. We see it with the San Antonio Spurs. That whole group has such a good collective mindset. It's all about the team. And I just don't know if you'll ever get that out of Rondo, a guy who doesn't get along with NBA championship winning coaches, a guy who I just think, who would want to be the guy's teammate? I know we all love his talent, but at the end of the day, when you consistently don't get along with a coach, when you're just doing things that just, I mean, from a team point perspective, you've got to look at this. How is Dirk Nowitzki, a guy who's won an NBA title, a real veteran, a pro's pro in this league, going to look at this situation? How is a guy like Chandler Parsons, who to this point has just been a guy who's done what it takes to win, has done the right things? I just don't think it's a good mindset. It's a guy you really want right now. I don't know what the future holds for Rajon Rondo, but I've always been very weary of him. I would not touch him if it was my franchise. I just can't deal with his baggage, can't deal with his mindset. I've never been a fan. And going back to Derrick Rose for a minute, it's disappointing because a guy like Derrick Rose, who's the complete opposite of Rondo, a guy who's always wants to do it for his teammates, always leaves it all out there on the floor, for a guy like him to not be able to stay on the floor, and you just look at what he's done for that franchise, and there's no diva attitude with him, and that's the thing that makes it disappointing too. Rajon Rondo, I just can't deal with him. That is going to do it for this segment, though. Moving away from the NBA a little bit, getting into some NFL, some boxing for the first time, and then continuing to move along into soccer. But we will be right back, so stay with us.